Welcome to episode 8 of Good Girls. Today we're talking about
the Orgasm Gap.
So if you're in the car with your father-in-law, I hope you guys are having a really smooth drive with no traffic, but turn it off because it's likely going to be pretty uncomfortable to listen to.
I think at this point things have already gotten weird with your father-in-law.
We already said orgasm gap. You already are probably driving with somebody who is experiencing an orgasm gap in their relationship.
Content warning, should have read the episode title.
So to start off with, let's just establish what is the orgasm gap. And this has been pretty consistently found in study after study, including ones done really recently, which is super depressing, that there's about a 30 percentage point gap between men who report having an orgasm during a sexual encounter and women. And
hetero women.
Hetero women. It is a little bit less for lesbians. So to go into that, what that looks like, for every 10 times that people have sex, men will orgasm 8 of those times, whereas women will orgasm 4 to 5 of those times, which is pretty depressing. Now, for women in lesbian relationships, that number increases to about 6 to 8 of those times.
Yeah, the study that I read that was just focused on, it was that they had all their data was disaggregated by sexuality or the sex of your partner. Then for hetero women, it was 3 out of 10 times. 30% was what it dropped to, 32%. So,
and
yikes, ladies.
There was a pretty fascinating post from Aching Amy in the Purple Pill debate about this. And it was, is male sexuality a net harm to women, and women are better off decentering men and entering into relationships with each other? Now, this was an extreme argument. I won't get completely into it, but the light evidence suggests that women would be having more orgasms if they're in relationships with each other than with men.
True, although then this gets back into, we know that sexuality is not a choice, because if it were, I would be a lesbian. Like, I feel like I have so many friend groups or like couples friends where we sit around talking,
and I'm
like,
not involve men if we.
If I had my choice, I would be married. If I could choose who I was attracted to, I would be married to the woman. In this group of 4 of us, I would be married to the woman, and we would have a tastefully decorated home, and we would just have all of the same hobbies in common, and there would be no meat consumed in my house. Like, we would just be so happy together, and our husbands would go marry each other, and they would just like live in a formless box,
and they would just throw so many meats on fire. That is like their favorite thing to do.
With an open fire pit in the middle, throwing meats on it, and not arguing about who cleans the bathroom, because just neither of them would clean the bathroom.
It will just grow up in funk, and then eventually one of their moms will come to visit, and they will clean it for them.
True. So, Aching Amy, I think that this is a nice thought, but if I could choose, I would, for a myriad of other reasons. I don't personally experience the orgasm gap in my relationship, but for numerous other reasons, I would be opting for that lesbian relationship. So, unfortunately, scientifically proven, can't choose your sexuality otherwise.
What I think is kind of beautiful is that there is an opportunity to not only close this gap, but to make it in the opposite direction, because women actually have way, way, way shorter refractory periods than men. You know, a woman can orgasm one after another after another. It is not at all unheard of in real life, in books, in anything, for a woman to have, you know, up to 3 orgasms or more per session. Whereas men, on the other hand, like, you know, they have like their one orgasm and they're like, I'm gonna need some time. Don't touch. I'm
gonna need some meats thrown on a fire to recuperate my stamina.
Going to need to go talk to other dads while throwing meats on fire while my kid is somewhere I'm not sure about.
That's what that cigarette's for. They gotta have some relaxation time.
Women actually also have slightly longer orgasms on average. Ours are about 20 seconds, whereas men are about like 5 seconds-ish. And for those who do have them regularly, they're reported as more intense than males. So we have a lot of good things going on with our orgasms. It's just that gap, and it just makes me so upset that it still exists in such a strong way. And I feel like it's part of the way I justify talking about sex as much as I do.
Yes, though not, okay, as you have pointed out, in the romance genre, that's one place where we're kind of trying to fantasize, at least in our imaginary worlds, about breaking out of reality. Because no, I don't know if you were able to do a full scientific, data analysis literature review on it, but very curious to hear. I know you had discussed doing a literature review on the ratio of times woman orgasms in books to the male orgasm.
Yes, this is extremely important. I am reporting live from Good Girls Research Division.
Good listeners, I would like you to know that Kay has just pulled up her official spreadsheet with her notes on this topic.
Metric spreadsheet of orgasms per encounter, and I looked at top 3 male leads. Zayden Ryerson, Rysand. I do not know Rysand's last name, but he's from A Court of Thorns and Roses, and he's very well known, also called Rhys. And Lucas from The Deep End, Allie Hazelwood. The Deep End, for those of you who may not have read it, is not Allie Hazelwood's necessarily her strongest book, but it is her sexiest book by far. And when you are not in the mood, you just go and you read that book, and you will be right in the mood for whoever your partner is. So I went through and I looked at orgasms per encounter. And what we were averaging was about 4 to 5 orgasms per encounter. And these were high, the ratio was highest for Rysand, who is 500 years old. So,
I mean,
yeah. And he's also banging an 18-year-old, but that's like a separate, we're not going to get into the age gap.
I just want to say he's really bucking the trends. This is next on my reading list, Kay, but one of the studies that I read was that there is some decrease in male orgasms over time due to the loss of testosterone. I think that's being counteracted in more recent years by the rise of little blue pills. But I just gotta say, whatever he's doing, we want to know his morning routine. It's really working for him. If
going at age 500 and still getting off his 20-year-old hookup.
Yeah, I have so many questions about that. But okay, looking forward to reading.
That's actually really interesting because their first hookup, he gets her off and he's like, now it's sleep time, nothing for me. And that's supposed to be really like, look, he's so unselfish. He's really putting her first. But now we know,
like May, December.
He might just have like really low T.
He's actually needs to go in the bathroom and put some of his testosterone gel on so that he can recuperate.
I just forgot my blue pill. That's all. You think that I'm being selfless, but no.
I have so many questions, but that's next up on my read list. So, good girls, I will be reporting back.
And I do wonder, because just with the overall growth of books written in romance, people reading romance, including, girls in high school, girls in college, if this is going to be an overall net good to the orgasm gap, because they're going to go into relationships thinking, my shit's nectar, my stuff's good. You're going to feel very, very lucky to go down on me. You want this. And I do think that sometimes, yes, there are some guys who are narcissists, but there are some guys who just they don't know what they're doing and they kind of need that push to, this is what I want in order to go down.
And this is an unscientific view from me, but I do feel like that group is a lot larger. I mean, you hear the assholes are always the more vocal group in any kind of thing, but I think that the assholes are also usually the majority that are just kind of this going down on a woman is nasty, blah, blah, blah. And then I think your group of quiet incompetence is much larger. And so there's hope for that group because I think that they just need a little bit of sex education, a little bit of direction. They need to read the She Comes First book. They need to get their wine pairings down.
Their vignette.
But I have to say, if you have that as your setup where the woman comes first, then you are kind of default setting things up because also, I do think one of the things that comes up in the research a lot that I think a lot of people know is that it also takes women longer to get going, more foreplay is needed. So I think and then that for the guys, they're just kind of bing bang done. And so I think that if you do have that as the typical order of events where it's like the guy just gets really excited, they're like
yeah,
and then like
done in 4 minutes, yeah,
then it's kind of like that's anticlimactic. So that is why the romance books, and honestly the pornos too, there's like lots of different back and forth of things, but you see in pornos, which are very like male pleasure centric, are still, I mean, I think that's part of like the male power, the male prowess, is that they're like so expertly able to repeatedly and powerfully get this woman off. But you'll see that where there's like multiple female orgasms, and then like everything culminates in the money shot.
The money shot. Oh, how we love the money shot. Basically an orgasmic pleasure in itself, the money shot for men and women alike, right?
Yes. Yeah. Especially all over the woman's face. That's a different episode.
I got into an argument about the orgasm gap this weekend where a male informed me that actually the orgasm gap is because men and women just aren't finding compatible partners with each other. If a woman does not orgasm from penetrative sex alone, and she's with a partner who does not like fingering or oral, then they are simply in an incompatible sexual relationship, and she needs to find a guy who does like oral and fingering. And I said, well, I just want you to know from the woman's point of view, I think that a guy who is not interested in fingering or oral for a girl might be universally viewed as a poor partner.
He's really limiting himself, yeah.
He said that I was viewing women as a monolith, and that there's women out there who only orgasm from vaginal sex, and that I wasn't acknowledging that. And I didn't want to be too argumentative, but I did want to let him know that he's probably never given a woman an orgasm before in his life.
I would agree with that, and I would be interested, as this post sits out there, to hear from the 1 to 3 women out there who exclusively orgasm through vaginal penetration, through P&V penetration. Because, I mean, I do know that there are women who can orgasm that way, but
1 in 5.
Yes, those women are the minority who can orgasm that way, and that's not to say that that's their exclusive or their
preferred way or their strongest orgasms. It's 1 in 5. And so I just have this funny feeling that the guy who was sharing this with me and going on about it was that it's not like he's only ever encountered that 1 in 5, but instead he encountered the other 80% who were just like, this is horrible sex, but who knows, maybe he has some other strength.
Well, again, I have orgasm that way, and I would agree it's like a less and it would take like very specific circumstances and angles, and it's just sort of like a lesser quality for me. And so even but I'm just saying, like, if I was with that guy and I had the potential to have that type of orgasm, but you just have somebody who's just like, oh, like, this is all I'm going to do for you. You better like this, or like you can go find somebody.
Fingering and oral just isn't my thing. I'm sorry.
Like, I would just be like, okay, well, huge turn off. This is not going to be between the two of us anyway.
I also I can't help but wonder for the 20 who report, vaginal orgasms or frequency of that, if there is actual some like clitoris stimulation or other stimulation that is happening during sex, and they're counting it as like, I had the orgasm during sex and therefore it was a vaginal one. But maybe you're right. Yeah. I see your face. You're like, don't belittle those women who reported that. They knew what they were doing.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it can have, especially because again, like, I feel like if you have like certain angles, I'm making hand gestures here that you can't see. But like I could see like the mechanics of it is sometimes there is like pressure against the clitoris, even if there's not like somebody digitally stimulating it. So I think that's like kind of the point.
Girl on top, or the whole great position for that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The whole G-spot thing, I don't know.
I used to, G-spots was a big Cosmo thing, like the 18 G-spots, and I used to really think about those G-spots.
This is going to be a separate episode, but I would like this is when we bring in our gynecologist specialist. We're going to bring in that expert, because I have questions about that. But then again, I don't know, because I have also not been with a man who is literally so big that he extends all the way up to my throat and so in that case you may be experiencing something that feels like an orgasm, because because it is actually your body just like convulsing and
I kept on seeing this
nearing
thing
death.
that was like, if the guy in like books and stuff, like if the guy like curls his fingers while he's fingering you, then he hits the spot or something. And so I was curious. I was like, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe it's just never happened. And so I asked for it, and I was like, ow.
Yeah. I haven't really. I don't
Yeah.
know, but let's bring an expert in here, because as previously mentioned, my only sex education that wasn't abstinence only came through Cosmo, and I'm not sure how reliable of a sex ed teacher that was. So we'll leave that one to the experts.
You know what made me happy is that a guy who reported that he always gives his partner multiple orgasms, and that if anything, the ratio is in her favor, not his. He said that some early on education that he got was from Maxim, and that Maxim had a whole article, so I would call that, men's version of Cosmo,
yes,
that it's like licking an ice cream cone.
Oh, yeah, I have read some good sex. I lived in a co-ed dorm in college, and so some of my dorm neighbors were subscribers to Maxim. So I was reading the articles, because I don't know if it's
that
just Playboy that you read for the articles or what, but... there was like some genuine, like tips in there.
Thank you, Maxim. Looking out for us.
Have you heard the ABCs one too?
Yes,
mix things up. That was like, I feel like I've heard that when people have gotten that one from Maxim of like do the whole alphabet. Although I feel like that was also in a movie at some point too. So maybe that one's more. That's like a guy's talking about what his trick is, and he says like I do the alphabet.
Oh, now that's really interesting. I've seen the ABC's reference, and I figured it was like just the ABC. I didn't realize they just sit there and do the alphabet.
They do a whole alphabet. I think that's supposed to be the tip, but I think that depends how dedicated to your craft you are, because I really think if you went through ABC and
or just
repeated,
get some feedback midway, because like they might just realize that like really only the I
think
is
about
what they
midway
need.
through the alphabet, you're just like,
That's what I'm imagining. Like,
and then she's like kind of tuned out because you've totally lost the thread.
Yeah, there's
but
like
you're
no rhythm happening. It's like, sorry, I'm trying to make my pee.
But this is a man who is earnestly trying. If he is getting through the whole alphabet, which is more than can be said for like the guy that you were with the fight in on Reddit and things like that. So
yeah, it's just an incompatibility. She just wants oral and fingering, and she's not going to get it if that guy is only interested in vagina. Like, it's like, yeah, well,
yeah,
nobody's going to get enjoyment out of that guy. That guy will be an incel, and he will join his little incel community, and he'll be like, oh, I just can't find a compatible person for
What's
me.
wrong with women these days?
It's because they work. I think that a big part, I don't know, to me, the big part of the orgasm gap, and it's very difficult to dig into these things because they're so underreported and it's so, taboo to talk about a lot of these topics, is just asking for things and feeling like your job in the bedroom isn't just to please the guy. And I think that that's a big part of it. And I think that when you're a more sexually free woman, because that's how you were raised and all that. Like, if you look at, 2X chromosomes, I would say is a super sex positive female space.
Yep.
And when this question is posed there, all the women are like, I'm having tons of orgasms compared to my partner. What are you talking about? And it's like, well, but this is like a very distinct space of people who would go on this. There is a huge other amount of women in the United States who are in very, much more conservative relationships where the dynamics are totally different. And
yeah, I'd be curious to read. I know there's been a number of studies, and you and I both read a few of them on the orgasm gap, but and they were broken down by different things. I was reading one that was age based, another one that was based on the sexuality or the gender of each partner. I would be really interested to know what kind of other like lifestyle or ideological things have an impact on it, similar. What was the one that you had mentioned in a previous episode about kind of the more traditional people who viewed relationships traditionally had like less pleasure? I'd be curious to know like what the orgasm gap is there between people who hold more traditional viewpoints versus people who are more either more like sexually educated or have more sort of like progressive views.
Because while the study on traditional roles was not asking about orgasms in specific, it was asking about sexual satisfaction. Women in traditional relationships were reporting lower sexual satisfaction, which would be pretty highly linked to orgasms. So
yeah.
in my unstudied opinion, but that seems like there would be an association there.
Well, and also I think that like another thing about like more conservative groups is that there is a real dim view on like self-exploration or masturbation or anything like that. And so if you don't have the space...
Especially for women.
Especially for women. Like I think with men, at least in my personal experience...
DJ.
Wait, what? What is the devil's DJ?
Just imagine the devil DJing.
Oh, no. I have not heard that one. Oh, does an angel die when you do that one, too?
Yeah, there you are, up there in your bedroom, playing the devil's DJ.
Oh, that's so cringy that it's actually funny. Yeah, like, I do feel like, with men, there's much more of this, like, oh, you know, it's forbidden, but we all unless you're, like, the very extreme, like, Mike Johnson and his son that have that, like, app when they have to report to each other. You're giving me a confused look. I'm 90% sure it's Mike Johnson that was doing it, but there's this, like, fundamentalist Christian app that is, like, supposed to be an accountability buddy thing to reduce, it's not just masturbation, it's, like, looking at porn, like, any kind of, like, sinful behavior, but it's something, like, you set an accountability buddy so that if you do that, like, if you look at porn, that it alerts your buddy, and I think it was Mike Johnson.
You don't want
the
those
Speaker
alerts.
of the House. And he was talking about how he and his son were accountability buddies with each other. And I was like, what a weird relationship dynamic.
Oh my gosh. I just want to give a ton of credit to my parents, which is that they would never in a million years want that information or to hear it.
Yeah. I do feel like at least my parents had like enough of a don't ask, don't tell that they knew that there was more going on. And like in an ideal world, there would have been like an actual conversation happening and like talking about protection and getting birth control and things like that. But in lieu of that, I will accept just like not having a conversation at all versus making your kid part of your like weird plot about your own like porn addiction or something. But anyway, to get back on that topic, I feel like there's at least like there's conversations about it, right? In the more fundamentalist kinds of Christian groups, whereas like women masturbating is like it doesn't even like enter. It's so shameful that it like doesn't even enter, and it's just like sort of this whole like you just don't even know what is down there, like you've never looked, you can't name anything.
And there was a study in UK by their government, and it showed that about only 2/3 of men and women could identify where the clitoris was on a diagram of the...
Well, there's your orgasm gap right there, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, if a third don't know where the clitoris is, that's where the problem starts. And only about half could identify, like, which hole was the vagina hole. Which means I'm not alone in my
they also didn't know there was a third hole.
When I was in high school. But still, it just shows, like, this basic education is missing. And then what a woman, you know, in high school and college needs to know to be able to self-explore and how to get started to self-explore and how to not feel shame about it.
Right. But I do think that at least 5% of the men that claim to not know which hole was the vagina are just men trying to have anal sex, and they're like, I thought it was the vagina.
Oh my gosh.
Guess we're having anal sex now. That sounds like something a college boyfriend would do.
And then like go back to the dorm all proud. Yeah, I think of like in the movie Horror Things with Emma Thompson, and you know it's a baby's brain is put into a grown adult, and so she starts getting a little bit older, and so when she has like a 6-year-old brain, she uses an apple to masturbate, and she's like, whoa, this feels so good. But it's like, do you even have the opportunity when you're younger to do that during any point? You know, not with an apple.
Hopefully not.
Please don't use an apple. But I know like a neighbor told me when I was in high school that she uses her electric toothbrush. And looking back, genius neighbor. Yeah. She found
washing
a vibrator
machines,
that
electric
was
toothbrushes. Honestly, those like self massagers that everybody is buying from Costco and the sharper image.
My sweetheart younger brother got me this like gigantic massager, and he gave one to me and one to my partner, and he's like, "What? Did he mean this? Like,
that's
to
so
use
sex
each other?"
positive of him.
And he's like, "No, my shoulder just really hurts, and so I started using it. It's so great that I wanted like all the family to have it." I was like, "You just got everybody a vibrator." And your heart is so sweet, you don't even realize it.
That's so pure.
If we think about closing this gap, I first of all think that you just have your partner listen to Good Girls, because I learned so many great tips here. But also, you know, what books, what magazines are great, and just normalizing that. And, you know, again, it doesn't have to be like a parent giving it to their child, like, I'm going to teach you how to successfully masturbate. But just leaving open, you know, you can read these books, these magazines, which might have some helpful content.
Yeah, I mean, maybe more. So I do remember having conversations with several people that like their moms would have those like Harlequin romance kinds of things on the shelves, and it's like, but when you have those kinds of things around, it's, I mean, I'm sure the moms,
opens up the
especially back in the like 90s, were not leaving those books there for their daughters to find them and explore their sexuality, but I do think that those kinds of books are another way, as we have often talked about, romance novels being a good way to kind of like explore these topics without reading a textbook on human sexuality. It's like a good way to explore them, even if those ones are maybe not the most, I don't know, I was going to say like most gender equal, but I feel like they still, like the Harlequin old-timey ones, they still do very much like focus first on like the female orgasm and things like that.
And you know, it's funny because I used to read a lot of historical fiction because my dad and I used to bond by both reading the same books.
I hope it was smutty historical fiction, Kay.
Historical fiction always has sexual scenes, but they're still like kind of a little bit more like men-based. That if only I had also been reading the same books as
with your dad, so that you can start a conversation with your dad about this.
He's commented before, like, yeah, the books always have scenes, and then you see the picture of the author, and you're like, they're just fantasizing. Things just, again, making it open. Do we need a Sesame Street episode on locating the clitoris? You know, probably not. Would I watch
Somebody's going to cancel us just for saying that.
Yeah. Big Bird. Hi, guys. I want to make sure you know this, since 1/3 of you don't.
Well, the book that I had mentioned before that I was reading, The Birds, the Bees, and the Elephant in the Room, does like talk about just like having things be like very open from a young age. And I was surprised by her suggestion for like when to provide condoms for young boys. She was actually suggesting like having them available to them, like just putting a box under the sink as young as like when they're starting puberty, because it also being like an encouraged
normalizes
thing. Normalizing it, but also encouraging them for them to masturbate into a condom to make it clean up more easy than like clogging up your pipes or like having to do gym sock laundry. And I was like, that's kind of brilliant, because then it's also like a lot of practice with putting on a condom and that they're not this like funny thing. But I was like, I really agree with that. And at the same time, I'm having a hard time picturing me giving my like 9-year-old son a box of condoms and they not ending up like having something very silly happen to them.
What would be more disturbing, like a gluey sock and realizing why it's gluey, or looking in the garbage bin and realizing that
and just like seeing a bunch of condoms. Like used condoms in there? Either way, this is just not a developmental stage that I've had to get to yet, and to be honest, I'm not looking to get to that one anytime soon.
But you gotta appreciate that little kids' brains go right to our natural animalistic places at a very early space.
Freud may have been right about one thing.
I don't want to call any particular kid perverts, but they certainly have a lot of comfort with nudity in their bodies and all that great stuff. So, kind of just tying up this conversation, and we'll get to a few other things to end the episode. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal, and it was on the sex recession. It used data from NORC, which used to be the National Opinion Research Center, but now they just literally go by NORC at University of Chicago. And it was done in 2024. And they found that sex is like drastically down Just 37% of people aged 18 to 64 report having sex at least once a week. That's down 55% from 1990. And the decline is even bigger for young adults, where about a quarter have not had sex in the last year, twice as many as 2010. So that's like a major, major difference. And guys, if we're going to close this sex recession, then you got to get a little better in bed, because women today, you know,
I guess because they no orgasms. Took Reddit guys' advice, and they're just, you know, waiting till they find a man who is actually adept at these things. And then when we're coming back disappointed, we're like, why are we wasting?
Yeah, I need a compatible partner. And so if you don't want to go down or finger, then I will just keep on waiting for my compatible partner instead of telling you that you're a selfish jerk.
Did they go into what what they think that the main reasons are for the sex recession?
If they did, unfortunately, I can't super explain it why, but I do think that especially for that age group, there's just a lot of, like the 18 to 29 one, there's a lot of like social isolation that happened during COVID, and there's a lot less drinking, there's a lot less going out with group of friends, all those things that lead to
that was what I had heard, is like a lot of like millennial sexual experimentation, like getting initiation was happening, like somewhat fueled by alcohol or other drugs. And so that's like kind of a positive thing, that it's also, I mean, not that we like necessarily regret anything that we did that had like alcohol and associated with sex, but I think that there was like room for a lot of stuff to go wrong, and a lot of millennials experienced you know, things that just left a lot of room open for like things the next day where you're like, I don't know that that was like sexual assault or not. It felt icky. It felt like there wasn't really fully consent given, because you can't fully give consent when you're intoxicated. So I have a lot of respect for Gen Z in that way, that maybe they are just like holding out for genuine connection, and, you know, men that actually want to read their Maxim advice columns.
I have heard from people dating now that there's a feeling that because it's so easy to date, and it's easy but it's hard, because, you know, like if you live in New York City, for example, you're on like 5 different dating apps, you have literally endless people you can meet, that there's a feeling when they go out with people that's almost on both sides of like, they're like, well, we can find somebody else, or we can find somebody better. And so if you at all don't have all the characteristics I'm looking for, then I'm gonna keep on searching. And that there's almost like this part of like how to be a social human that was lost during COVID, and like how to, you know, be in long-term relationships. And another piece of advice would be to move it to a city, because cities are the best.
Yeah, a lot easier to meet people and potentially meet people, because I know some people are so sick of the apps, but that there is more potential opportunity to meet people other ways. Although, again, I don't know. I mean, I have heard various research things about kind of how people just are not, I don't want to say prioritizing relationships, like people don't care about them as much anymore, but I think because it is so much work, and it does feel like it's just like a part-time job, is what I've heard a lot of people describing it, of like you have of just that you're basically like a recruiter trying to fill a position where you have like this overflow of applications, and you're trying to like set search criteria that aren't like too tight that you're like screening out potential good candidates, but also not like, so you have 500 applicants that you have to process and like spend all your time sifting through. So I do think that it's very real.
Yeah, and that was mentioned in the article, that somebody said dating became so exhausting that there were just better ways to fill my time. Like now instead I'm part of a bowling league, I volunteer on this night, I do all these different things. I do a running club, because when I was going on dates, I was ultimately losing time that could have been spent doing enjoyable things. Where you should theoretically be able to meet a person through doing those other things. I don't know. Actually, I personally love dating, and when I met my partner and realized like that was the closest thing to my soulmate that I think is possible, I was like, oh, but I'm going to miss dating so much.
I do like to sometimes live vicariously through people who are still dating, mostly because then it's like a fun little trip into somebody else's life instead of having to deal with that full time. But it is just, and I do miss the like people watching aspect of it.
If you knew exactly like, okay, within 1 year I will find somebody in XYZ so I can just have fun for 3 or 4 months. I don't know. I had the time of my life going to like just, happy hours,
go
and all
on a break or something. Like open up your marriage for 6 months. No, but I think like one other thing is that it's also just like the existential, and maybe this is like everybody's like total like decrease in sex and not just single people, but it's also just like the general existential dread that exists all around us. And I think there is a certain amount of like, some of this comes from this like biological urge to like, you know, mate and reproduce and things. And I think that so many of us, even people who are in like a partnered relationship, are like, or who like genuinely want kids, or you're like, what is, like, I just think that it kind of takes away some of that like biological drive a little bit, because you're just like, the world is on fire. So I have genuine questions about that. That one seems harder to research. Also, another one that I came across just for sort of, and maybe this is more one for the orgasm gap, is hormonal birth control is another one. And in general, I had a friend who's a therapist had said that once, that is like a common thing in heterosexual relationships, is like, obviously men's hormones affect their sex drive and things, but they don't have them on such a cyclical kind of thing. And so she was like, it is very common for women to have natural hormonal fluctuations, and that naturally your body, like, you have a higher sex drive closer to when you're ovulating. So you would have more like ups and downs versus like a male sex drive being kind of more like constant. And then in addition, if you're on hormonal birth control, which includes a lot of IUDs too, I know a lot of people I'm on are on IUDs, that it's basically disrupting that natural hormonal highs and lows, and that it decreases overall some of the hormones that are associated with sex drive. And
a little ad that I am receiving no actual ad money for is that I have not experienced that with the Marina. The Marina has been fantastic in keeping all drives intact.
Oh yeah, I have the Marina too. And it's hard for me to say sometimes, because it's also hard. Like, I've been on a number of different birth control. I really did not enjoy being on oral contraceptives. I felt like I did notice that of just like a lot of sexual side effects. And it was just very hard to remember to take them. So like, that seems like not the best choice for most people, but it is often what is easiest to get a hold of, especially if you are young. But I've had like NuvaRing before, and so I've been on different.
Used to always come out on the guy's penis, and that's just like, it looks so weird when it does. Like when it's like wrapped around, it scars you.
He's just so large that he's just suctioning out everything that's in there. Okay,
this happened before my current relationship.
No, but I think that that is another, but it's hard for me to say that, for example, because I feel like there's been so many other like factors that were changing that it's hard for me to isolate. And I know a few people, like I did have somebody who had like such a terrible reaction to the birth control that she was on, that she became like extremely depressed and like went off of it and immediately had a relief from symptoms. So I think sometimes it's also harder to tell if you are having a decrease in sex drive due to that, but if you have small kids, is it because you have low energy because of your kids? Is it this? It's that. It's hard to, I mean, obviously you can't do a science experiment so easily in your own life, and even if you did, you have n=1, so it would not be so accurate. But I think that it's hard to sometimes like pull out for women or for people in general. Like there probably are specific things in your life, especially because I think women have more of that like drain of, since there's a lot of studies showing that women do the higher share of the household tasks, things like that, that can obviously be something that affects your sex drive. So I think sometimes you get moms who are like doing more of like okay, like I'm just like participating in this because I know that this is like a thing that couples are supposed to do, but like honestly, I'm exhausted. My mind's in 6 other places. Like I think with all the mental load, that like those are some of the things that can contribute as well to like women being more like going into a sexual encounter with just like, oh, I'm just gonna like get this done with so that I can like move on, go to bed, whatever.
And that's supposed to be like very cyclical, that if you go into it with that happening where you're like, oh, I'm having sex because I don't really want it, but I'm just doing it because it's something that I should say yes to and I'm not going to enjoy it, then your body stops responding as much, like the next subsequent time. So even times where you were in a situation where you might have, your body's now like, no, she told me in the past that I don't need to get all ready for this, and that I'm not super excited to have sex with this person.
Yeah, that your mental association with it is more that, especially then we're like gonna bring back in all of the cultural things that you have and like the religious upbringing where it is just more of like the wife's responsibility. Or we've talked about purity culture when you've been like raised in a situation your whole life where you've been told that sex is dirty and sex makes you impure, that your brain doesn't just like move over so easily then to like, oh, sex is fun and everybody's pleasure matters and we do this because it's enjoyable. Your brain, like, probably for a lot of people with conservative Christian upbringings, their brains are still struggling to make that switch over. So then when you have other environmental factors, or you have men who are kind of fumbling around, not able to locate the clitoris or even the vagina, then, you know, I think that you can definitely you can see where this situation comes from.
Yeah, I think that if you were raised in some certain environments, that telling somebody, hey, I need a little bit longer, hey, like, we're moving right on into sex and this is going to be done in X amount, actually, then can you stay here for like 5 more minutes so I'm ready? Not to give minute amounts to it, but just the idea of taking time for yourself and feeling like you deserve to tell somebody else that they're going to need to hold off and wait a little bit or do a little bit more work for you to be ready. It's not something that I think comes naturally to
or like to be able to name what those things are that might be the steps that need to happen before you're even ready for like what would be more broadly considered foreplay, like from like if your sexual knowledge comes from like watching porn or reading Maxim or whatever. I think that for some women there are steps that would happen before that to even get you to the point where you would want clitoral stimulation or something like that. I think to know to ask for those or to be okay with like that being part of the steps, because as much as we gave porn some props in this episode for like having, you know, maybe the woman come several times before we get to the man, well, not before we get to the man, but before the man comes, but like everything that's happening is still very, you know, he comes in and delivers the pizza and within 30 seconds, like she's got her top off and, you know, like they're going down on each other and stuff like that.
And
piece
she's
of
just
it,
so ready from having the dick shoved in her throat.
She's just really enjoying that. So that part, less realistic.
Okay, so to tie up this episode, the orgasm gap exists. It's real. There's some big lack of education that happens that might be contributing to it. There's gender dynamics that might be contributing to it.
It just seems like it's so many factors that for everybody, there are probably really different reasons. Like if you looked at, you know, 6 different people who were like experiencing that in their relationships, like you would probably come up with like 6 really different reasons as to why exactly they're experiencing it.
Yes. So the best thing that you can do to solve it is to listen to the Good Girls podcast and like and subscribe, obviously, but also to have open conversations with your partner to make sure that everybody's kind of up on what they can be doing.
Open-minded, open channels of communication, open-minded, trying different things, being willing, I feel, yeah, like not having, if there is some kind of if it's a relationship that has more, you know, kind of habitual nature to it, being willing to kind of start in a different place, move at a different speed, try some different things.
Yes.
Get a diagram, find out where the clitoris is located. If you
Knowing where the clitoris is probably important.
If you find the G-spot, comment.
Yeah, tell us about these G-spots and how they work for you, and it's very specific. Just give us a little map.
And then write to Cosmo and thank them for teaching us about the G-spot.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen like 19 of them mapped out sometimes, and I'm like, I don't know. I really only know if one is on my clitoris. But I also want to celebrate because we have officially made it to episode 8, and episode 7 is where the pod fade happens that about half of podcasts don't get through.
So here we are. And not only are we here, but we have our own subreddit now
called the Good Girls Forum, and you know, it's 4 of us, but man, the 4 of us that are there are wonderful.
Please join. And
it's engaging, and it's a way that we usually use these conversations to think about, you know, different podcast topics and different things to think about on already chosen podcast topics, so it's a nice way to engage.
Especially when we post poll questions in some other subreddits. Apparently, we're not allowed to do that, so we want.
I don't want Starhammer banning me from the sex Reddit for asking a question with no self-promotion again, so I had to start my own forum.
Plus, I want to hear from our listener in Saudi Arabia. Tell us more.
Yes, our Saudi Arabian listener. We're not trying to de-identify you, but you're very welcome to comment at any time. We would love to engage with you.
Just like drop a casual post. Like we won't out you or anything, but we do want to know more.
Yeah, we don't want you being tied up unless you want to be. Oh, have a great day, everybody. Thank you for listening.